It was just another ordinary afternoon at the school cafeteria. The scent of warm food filled the air as students lined up, chatting about their day. Laughter echoed from the tables where friends gathered, sharing stories and secrets between bites. But amidst the lively scene, one boy stood frozen near the counter, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets, his head slightly lowered. His name was Jake. Jake was different from most kids at school, not because he wanted to be, but because life had made it that way. He had learned far too early what it meant to go without. Some days he'd bring a small sandwich from home, barely enough to keep away the hunger. Other days, he simply pretended he wasn't hungry at all. But today, as he stared at the trays filled with steaming food, his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. He had no money, and he knew what that meant. Another lunch spent sitting alone, watching others eat, pretending he wasn't starving. Just as he was about to turn away, a warm voice interrupted his thoughts. "Jake," the cafeteria cashier called out, her tone gentle. "You're all set." He blinked in confusion. I didn't pay." "It's taken care of," she said, with a reassuring smile. "Go on, grab your tray." Jake hesitated, looking around as if expecting some kind of trick. That's when he saw her, Ms. Taylor, his teacher, standing just a few feet away. She gave him a small nod before turning back to her own meal, as if what she had done was nothing at all. Jake swallowed hard, his chest tightening with something unfamiliar. Gratitude. Relief. He had never asked for help, but somehow she had seen him. She had known. That small act of kindness might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, but to Jake, it was everything. He never forgot it. Years passed. Life moved on. Jake eventually left that school, stepping into a world that wasn't always kind but had, on rare occasions, shown him moments of unexpected generosity. He carried those moments with him, like tiny sparks of warmth in a cold world. But life has a way of bringing things full circle, and one day, long after he had last seen Ms. Taylor, he found himself standing outside a familiar school building. In his hands, he held something, a gift, one he had been waiting years to give. He took a deep breath, then stepped inside. What happened next? No one could have expected. Jake's footsteps echoed softly against the school's tiled floors, each step pulling him deeper into a flood of memories. The hallway still smelled the same, a mix of pencil shavings, old books, and something faintly sweet from the cafeteria down the hall. The walls, once towering and intimidating, now felt strangely small. He had spent years walking these halls, carrying the weight of things no child should have to worry about. He remembered the worn-out shoes he used to wear, how he'd shuffle his feet so no one would notice the holes. He remembered the days he'd fake a stomachache just to avoid lunchtime, the embarrassment of not having enough money, always heavier than his hunger. And he remembered Ms. Taylor, the teacher who had changed everything with one simple act of kindness. As he walked toward the front office, he felt a nervous energy building inside him. He had spent years wondering if she would even remember him. To her, he might have been just one of many students she had helped over the years. But to Jake, that lunch she bought for him had been the moment that shifted something inside. It was the first time someone outside his family had seen him. Not as a poor kid, not as a charity case, but as a person who mattered. The receptionist glanced up as he approached. "Can I help you?" she asked with a polite smile. "I'm looking for Ms. Taylor," Jake said, clearing his throat. "Is she still teaching here?" The woman's expression softened, as if she recognized the name instantly. "She is, but she's in class right now." She hesitated, glancing at the clock. "Would you like to wait? I can let her know someone's here for her when she's free. Jake nodded, adjusting the small box in his hands. Yeah, I'll wait. He sat in the front office, his mind drifting back to the past. Life after middle school had been anything but easy. He had bounced between different jobs, scraping by, learning hard lessons about survival. But eventually, he had found his way, working his way up, building something of his own. He had never forgotten where he came from, though, and he had never forgotten Ms. Taylor. The door to the office finally creaked open, snapping him out of his thoughts. A familiar voice followed. You said someone was looking for me? Jake turned, and there she was, Ms. Taylor. Her hair had a few more streaks of grey now, but her eyes were just the same, warm, thoughtful, carrying that same kindness he had remembered all these years. She looked at him for a moment, studying his face, and then her lips parted, slightly in recognition. Jake? She asked, almost in disbelief. He felt a lump form in his throat. Yeah, he said with a small smile. It's me. A wave of emotion flickered across her face. Surprise, happiness, maybe even a little bit of pride. My goodness. Look at you, she said, shaking her head. It's been so long. It has. Jake agreed. He took a step forward, holding out the small box in his hands. I came back because I never got to say thank you for everything. Ms. Taylor looked down at the box, then back at Jake. You don't have to do this, she said softly. But I do, he insisted, because that one day, that one lunch, it meant more than you ever knew. She took the box with careful hands, hesitating before lifting the lid. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she was speechless. Inside was a key. Ms. Taylor looked up, confused. Jake, what is this? He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. It's a key to something I've been working on for a long time, he explained. A place where kids like I was, won't have to worry about lunch money or supplies or feeling invisible. Ms. Taylor's hands trembled slightly as she held the key. You did this, Jake nodded. Because of you. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at him, truly seeing the man he had become. And in that moment, neither of them spoke, because sometimes gratitude is too big for words. But the story wasn't over yet, because what Ms. Taylor didn't know was that this gift was only the beginning. Ms. Taylor stared at the key in her hands, her fingers tracing its smooth edges, as if trying to make sense of what Jake had just said. The weight of his words settled in, and she looked up at him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. You really did this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. I did. But I wouldn't have, if not for you. She shook her head in disbelief. A deep breath, escaping her lips. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Jake replied. Just come with me. I want to show you. Ms. Taylor glanced at the school's front desk, as if to ask permission to leave for a moment. The receptionist gave her an encouraging nod, as if sensing this was something important. Without another word, she followed Jake out of the building. The drive wasn't long, but the air was thick with anticipation. Ms. Taylor kept glancing at Jake, as if trying to piece together the boy she once knew with the man sitting beside her. He had grown, not just in height and confidence, but in a way she couldn't quite put into words. When they finally arrived, Jake pulled into a small parking lot beside a modest but well-kept building. The sign above the door read, "The Taylor Foundation." Ms. Taylor froze. Her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, her eyes darting between Jake and the sign. Jake, is this? He nodded. It's named after you. Because without you, none of this would exist. Her breath hitched. And for a moment, she couldn't move. She had spent her whole life trying to help kids, in small ways, never expecting anything in return. And yet, standing before her was living proof that even the smallest act of kindness could plant a seed that grew into something bigger than she ever imagined. Jake led her inside, where a few staff members were busy setting up. Shelves were lined with school supplies, warm meals were being prepared in the back, and a quiet study area was set up near the windows. It was a place where kids could come without fear of being turned away, where they would be seen, supported, and given the chance to focus on being kids. Miss Taylor turned to Jake, her voice thick with emotion. How did you do all this? It took time, Jake admitted. But after everything I went through, I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to help someone the way you helped me, I wouldn't waste it. I built my own business, worked my way up, and when I finally had enough, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. She shook her head in amazement. Jake, this is more than I ever could have imagined. He smiled, the weight of years of struggle lifting off his shoulders. That's how I felt the day you bought me lunch. For a long moment, they stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of possibility. Ms. Taylor reached out and squeezed Jake's hand. You have no idea how proud I am of you. Jake swallowed, feeling an unexpected lump in his throat. He had spent so many years pushing forward, trying to prove to himself that he was more than the hungry boy standing in that cafeteria line. But standing here, hearing those words from the woman who once saw him when no one else did, he finally felt like he had made it. Ms. Taylor wiped a tear from her cheek and let out a soft laugh. I still can't believe you named this after me. Jake grinned. Well, I had to make sure no one ever forgets what one small act of kindness can do. And as they stood there, in the place that had once been just a dream, they both knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them had ever imagined.